Hey, what's happening, all you amphibians out there? I'm Duuz-Diz-Din coming at you again with another episode of Amphibia. It's season two's episode 23 and 24 titled Ivy on the Run and After the Rain. Let's get into it. Now, Ivy on the Run, it should be pretty obvious, focuses on none other than our favorite spunky girl, Ivy, and I love her room. I'm really digging it. I love that she has a full on martial artist training setup in her room, but in comparison to her more uptight mother who constantly has her doing various chores, it's very stark difference. And her mother is very uptight, complete with nitpicking that she didn't do the best job at cleaning the dishes, but yeah, I mean, you eat off of that. I can kind of understand that. It's a lot of the other stuff that I'm just like, okay, you're going a little too far, lady. But Ivy has gone off to hang out with Sprig after catching up on some of the chores she was forced to redo. And we even get to see that Anne is going out to teach Polly Muay Thai, something that she learned at a young age because she was a very rambunctious youngster when she was little, which I feel like that makes a lot of sense. But Muay Thai is a very traditional Taiwanese form of martial arts. So it's interesting that she actually learned that particular form of martial arts. It's always interesting to see what elements of her culture she actually embraced that never really came to the forefront a lot of the time. But Sprig also tells Ivy about his adventures outside of Wartwood and, how he was a great hero and a man of action on the road, which, let's be frank, he kind of was in a lot of situations. He just embellishes a little on the details. But Ivy ends up being pestered by some of the communiques from her mother, even missing a rare find that she could have caught. And her mother is forcing her to come home for some etiquette lessons for the most part. Meanwhile, Polly is doing her best to go up against Anne in Muay Thai, but because of Polly's impatience, she just can't get the jump on Anne. We also have a weird appearance by Wally, who I feel is literally just there because he has nothing else to do. Like, Anne is literally the one friend that he truly has. So he just likes hanging out with her, which is actually kind of sweet, all things considered. And as it turns out, Wally is actually pretty good at martial arts, much to the dismay of Polly. But it's just like, Polly, you have no legs. Give it time, girl. Meanwhile, speaking of impatience, Ivy is really starting to get fed up with the lessons that her mother is forcing her to go through. And it's not just the lessons, it's the fact that every little bit of imperfection gets judgment from her mother, and I can understand that all too well. You never want to be nitpicked at for something you don't care about and not doing it perfectly. It's frustrating. And Ivy ends up blowing up at her mom that her mom just doesn't get her, that she wants to see the world and go on cool adventures. So she ends up running off to her room and even ends up coming to the conclusion that she might as well just run away. So she hightails it to Sprig's place and tries to get him to come with her. But they end up being tracked down by her mother. And while she tries her best to communicate that she's not coming back, her mother is in hot pursuit. Meanwhile, Polly is getting frustrated with the fact that she just can't get one over on Anne, only for them to be interrupted by Ivy and her family drama. And it even gets so bad to the point that Ivy even tells her mom that she doesn't want to be her daughter anymore, which, yeah, that was a step a little too far. Like, even Ivy realizes, just like, yo, no. Okay, yeah, that was not what I meant to say. That's not what I meant to say. But she does profess, it's just like, look, I just want to be able to go out, and it feels like you don't understand me or see things from my point of view. Again, something I can relate to, at least on a smaller level, if nothing else. But in a shocking turn, her mother says that, well, if you manage to beat me in one of 3 rounds of martial arts, you can do as you please. Much to the shock of Ivy, who feels like, okay, martial arts, this will be easy. And you should know by now, of course, her mother's going to be some expert martial artist, and she really kind of is. But the martial arts she shows off are feel like they're more flash and not so much substance, if nothing else. But if nothing else, apparently it was something she learned as she traveled the world, much to the shock of Ivy. You know, and she shows off some pretty decent moves and abilities, but again, she's going up against a little girl. It's just like they're gonna be impressive to pretty much anyone under a certain age. And as Ivy kind of gives into her defeat, her mother starts to tell her to implement the various different tea ceremony techniques that she's been teaching her. And, as she starts to roll out everything that she's learned from her mother, she actually finds that it makes for a pretty decent form of self defense. It's still more flash than substance, but at the same time, it's pretty fun to watch, if nothing else. And, Ivy's mom even lets her get the winning blow, if nothing else. And she admits to Ivy that she taught her a lot of this in order to protect her because she does want to take her daughter out of Wartwood one day. She actually got a lot of her teas and her tea sets from traveling the world of Amphibia, if nothing else, which, is fairly large. But, you know, it was all to protect her daughter on the journeys to come because she does want to take her daughter out of Wartwood at some point and just go on a trip, go on a journey. And, that's sometimes what kids need. Just explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and sometimes if you have a good kid, they will understand what you're all about. And we end this segment with Polly trying once again to get the jump on Anne, only to knock out Wally cold. We then pick up on the story heavy section of this episode after the rain. It's finally to address the situation with the Calamity Box, as Anne finds out that Marcy has located the first temple, and while they suit up in armor, as Hopadiah puts it, custom made by him, they also need the Calamity Box. And if you don't remember, Hopadiah buried that shit. So he says, yeah, it'll be here tomorrow from my contacts. But, as the night goes on, Anne is just too impatient to finally set out. She's made her peace with the planters and she's ready to get the long, arduous journey home underway. But then she notices Hopadiah digging in the backyard, with him noting to himself that the Calamity Box is gone, much to the shock of Anne, realizing that Hopadiah had lied to her. And Hopadiah does admit that he lied and that he's sorry, but Anne is just at such a loss to believe that someone she trusted so much. Because for Anne, Hopadiah has really just been a good, you know, uh, what is it, a parental figure in her life for the most part. And, it really never dawned on me just how much stock and took into believing Hopadiah all this time. Like, I guess she really put a lot more faith in him than I thought, because she really gets intensely angry about this, and I can't blame her for her anger, but she holds this grudge for a good while, a little bit longer than I would have expected from Anne. But, Hopadiah ends up admitting everything to the kids when they wake up in the morning, Hopadiah having stayed up all night waiting for Anne to hopefully come back. But when the kids find out about what Hopadiah did, they tell him, hey, you gotta go after her, make sure she's okay. And they make the decision to go out and find the music box, see where it could have ended up. Hopadiah, Anne ends up in the same cave that she was in, and the start of her journey. This was the place that she was camping out when she first set up. Meanwhile, back in Wartwood, Polly and Sprig find that there are various different holes all over Wartwood. Apparently, something has been burrowing around stealing stuff. And Soggy Joe, complete with coming out of bush action, that Polly is right on the money with saying he's really got to stop popping out of bushes. Like, Soggy Joe, what you doing, man? And he thinks that he knows what creature caused this. It's a kind of creature that gathers different items in order to make a shell out of for a mating dance called the Love Nado. But before Soggy Joe can finish telling them about how dangerous this is, they run off and find the hole that one of the creatures burrowed through, finding the Love Nado complete with the music box. But ultimately, Sprig as well as Polly end up overwhelmed by the creatures. Meanwhile, Hopadiah has found Anne, but she is just not having it with Hopadiah's explanation. But he says that it was something really important, and there's a really deep meaning behind why he did what he did. But this is interrupted by the screams and cries from Sprig and Polly. And when Hopadiah and Anne arrive at the Love Nado, which, oh god, that's such a nasty name. Love NATO. Ugh. And it's gross to look at too, honestly. But they find Sprig and Polly all up in that Love NATO. Ew. But Anne is unwilling to work with Hopadiah to save the kids. That's it until she gets in over her head herself. And Hopadiah convinces her for the children. And so they set out, complete with weird tongue physics from Hopadiah, as well as him just throwing himself and the children out of the pit. It's just like, it's the most egregious abuse of physics I've seen in this show, but I'll accept it. As Anne ultimately decides to set off now that she's had the music box, still unable to trust Hopadiah even after all of this. Like, Anne, come on, the man just saved you. He wouldn't be doing this just to control you and keep you here. But Hopadiah explains that the whole reasoning behind it was in regards to something that happened to the kids' parents. Something that is obvious that the kids know all about and feel that it's a touchy subject that Hopadiah shouldn't have to explain. But Hopadiah feels that Anne deserves the truth. That while Hopadiah was out adventuring, basically, at one point, herons had attacked Wartwood, and ultimately this was the attack that took away both Sprig and Polly's father. And ever since, he's been hell-bent on protecting the kids, no matter what. But finding out that this was something so important to Anne, he feels that he's failed the kids, and him and her and everybody, because Anne's a part of his family now. And hearing this, Anne forgives him, and I'm glad for it. I still feel that it was a little forced with the conflict, and honestly, the backstory, I feel like something about it just doesn't add up for me, if nothing else. But I prefer not to have this thing looming over them any longer, because at first with Hopadiah it was one thing, because we didn't know Hopadiah at first. But as it went on, it's just like, Hopadiah, it just doesn't feel right to have him continuously hiding this from Anne. There's such a good family unit that it's just really hard to see Alpadiah continuing on with this lie. And, that I feel like that comes to a forefront when he does admit to Anne at first what he did, but ultimately is also because he was found out. So, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But the planters have all reconciled, and Hopadiah even shows her the entry that got him so spooked, which even Anne has to admit, like, the name Calamity Box and, all this is just like, okay, yeah, I can kind of understand where you're coming from now. And she tells the planters, just like, look, maybe you shouldn't come. This is going to be really dangerous. But the planters are all in on helping out Anne because she is family, and family doesn't leave family behind, no matter what. A nice conclusion of sorts to the whole Calamity Box and Hopadiah misleading Anne and all that good stuff, but also not the best because there was so much build up to this whole situation. To have it reach a resolution like this, it's just like it's good to that it's finally over and done with, but at the same time it feels like we missed some plot beats we could have had, like something about the history of this tying in more, but at the same time, if he knew what the Calamity Box was, that he would need a book to tell him that it was dangerous. So it's really kind of hard to tell, if nothing else. But I hope that's not all there is to the end of Sprig and Polly's parents and, Hopadiah's paranoia. I feel that the Heron situation, there has to be something deeper there, and I'm hoping we find out in the future. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think about the section of the episode with Ivy and her whole backstory? And what did you think about this conclusion to the plot line of Hopadiah hiding the music box? Did you enjoy it, or do you feel that more could have been done with it? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye!